interest in the relative earnings of various ancestral groups in the US, most especially because the earning differences are pronounced. Okay, so you could see that in the table 12.6, earnings as a percent of US average. So these are different ethnic groups: Mexican, Puerto Rico, Cuban, Chinese, Japanese, so on and so forth. Then the estimated earnings as a percentage of US average if the productive characteristics of group were average. Okay, so these are the two ways in which they are comparing. So what are the interpretation of this table? So guys, it says that the first column displays the full-time earnings of men from selected ancestral groups relative to the US average. And from it, one can note that the relative earnings of men whose ancestry were Russian, Italian, or Japanese. So, guys, Russian 157, Japanese 133, and then which is the other one? Italian. Okay, Italian is 121. So, their salaries are much higher than what the average American citizen is receiving. So of course the question is who is an American citizen. So but in general, what the average US individual would be, white male would be receiving. So they have a much higher. But so particularly on Latin countries are performing very bad. So Native American 85, Mexican 71, Cuban 90, uh, Puerto Rico it is 87. So guys, they have especially low earnings. So this is one part. Drawing upon our discussion of earning differences across gender race, we must ask to what extent these differences result from the different level of productive characteristics. So guys, you could see how you can prepare this. So every discrimination, whether it's by gender, whether it's by race or ethnicity, we are looking into the first thing, that whether there is a difference in their earnings or not. Okay, so first is that actual, whether I can see through the table or not. Second is, once I find out that yes, there is a difference, what are the potential reasons, whether these are productive reasons or whether these are the because of the discrimination, because I belong to a certain class. Okay, so first we try to figure it out, my productive reasons. Okay, because of my productivity, it is because of that, so I'm getting the less salary. But it could be discrimination as well, which will now follow. So guys, it says, drawing upon our discussion on the earning difference across gender and race, we ask about the difference resulting from the different levels of productivity. So guys, of course, there will be huge difference, people belonging to a particular group because of the level of education they have attained, and also in terms of the language proficiency. So guys, particularly the people belonging to Latin American countries, they have a less proficiency in English. So as a result, they are not able to get those white collar or high paying jobs. So as a result, their average salaries would tend to be lower than what your other countries, like what they are talking about, Italian or Russian, they would be receiving. So guys, one of the reason they are telling is educational attainment, for example, across ethnic group is very divergent. So people belonging to Japanese, Chinese, Russian, they have very high level of educational attainment. Yes, Vedai? Yes.
So, ma'am, when we talk about English, I mean, in general, I don't think in Russian schools English is taught. Um,
Huh.
like,
Yeah, yeah. But yes, but they have figured it out that their English is better. I don't know. They must have particular. So whether it might happen like if they are doing a sample study or something like that, in that group they might have a good English proficiency. Of course, in general they might not. But whether so ancestors. So you have to remember that those Russians who came to America because of some reason or the other,
okay,
so
okay,
different generation they have. So if you will see a lot of people in American firms, there are many Russians who are actually at a very high profile jobs, and their English proficiency is very good as well. Okay.
okay, ma'am.
Okay. So guys, first reason is of course your average level of education that you have attained, and then second in terms of proficiency in English. So guys, it says the second column in this table 12.6, okay, represent estimate of what earnings in each group would have been if observed productive characteristics including education and fluency in English were equalized across all groups. So how would that change? So that would, guys, you can see if we are equalizing, you would see there is a rapid increase in the earnings that they would be getting if we are giving that kind of an advantage to all the groups. The results that if observed productive characteristics were equalized, men of Japanese or Russian ancestry would have earned 15 to 18% more than that of the average, while those of the Mexican, Chinese, or Native American would have earned roughly 5% less. Okay, so if we are taking that disadvantage of education and fluency in English, the improvement is there, but still the people belonging to Mexican, Chinese, or Native American, they still have a less salary, that is 5% less. This could be possible because of discrimination that they face. So guys, now they are talking about discrimination because of social concern about the labor market discrimination. It is very natural to focus on groups whose earnings appear to be low given their productive characteristics. And in recent year, however, there is lot of interest in the diversity of earnings across white ethnic group for which the discrimination is of less concern. Important intergenerational transfer of ethnic human capital, some of which manifest in divergent returns of education. Okay, so depending upon, of course, kind of return they will get on education and the kind of, in a sense, productive earnings that they would be getting, that is also impacting. As a result, of course, because there's a wage discrimination happening, so they know that there's no point of actually going into the further education as well. So as a result, because of these different rate of returns of education that every ethnic group receives, there it will bound to impact the level of earnings that they are getting. Okay, so guys, I'm just repeating, because of a certain discrimination that exists in the market, which actually manifest in the form of different wages that a particular ethnic group receives. Okay, so if you receive different salaries, what would happen? My preferences for attaining a particular level of education would be getting impacted. So if I had to do post graduation, even if I'm interested, but I know because I would face this wage discrimination in the labor market, I might decide no, it's okay. I just end up with the undergrad grad study and start working, because even after doing the post graduation study, I would not be manifesting that into a higher salary. So it's better to attain a lower level of education and do into that job which will give me a decent salary. So guys, this is what the point is being raised. So guys, it says that the recent interest in the ancestral groups that are suspected victim of the labor market discrimination have centered on Hispanskis. So what? Sorry, I'm pronouncing wrong. But what are those groups or those ethnic groups? These are basically your Latin American countries: Mexican, Puerto Rico, Cuban, Central or South America. And why? While these groups have a shared a common linguistic heritage, okay, so Spanish and these basically that's the language being done there. But generally, I find that a lot of people who know Spanish, they're good in English also. I don't know. But yeah, one can infer from the table 12.6, they can somewhat have a different earnings and human capital levels. Aggregating these groups into one is convenient for the purpose of research because it permits sample of yearly data large enough to support the research, but it somehow misses some of the cultural differences highlighted just above when discussing earnings by ancestry. Okay, so there's some kind of a cultural or that intergenerational transfers that also happens from one group to the other. But if we are characterizing all the Latin American countries into one group, then we are missing out on that point. Okay, so guys, what have they have found out that what is the reason for this worker characteristics or discrimination? That of course, which have been repeated, that there is a low level of education among these individuals and they have less experience in the labor market. And then the third about the low level of proficiency in the English. Okay, so three reasons which impact to the productivity, and as a result they are segregated or given a salary which is less. Low level of education, less experience, and low levels of proficiency in your English, so which directly impacts your productivity, and as a result they are paid less. So guys, this is up till this part. I hope it's understandable. Yes. 15 minutes and then we'll wind up. Okay, so guys, this is now we talk about theories of market discrimination. So if there is a discrimination which is happening, so how do we understand? So there are different. Yes, Arya.
Mom, is that chapter done?
This is from chapter 12 only. Once we end this part, the second part. This second,
So my mom is continuation of the same topic.
Arya, your voice is breaking. I cannot hear you. This is chapter 12 only, second section, which is about theories of market discrimination. Okay, same chapter. Yeah, it's in continuation in the same chapter. Okay, so guys, theories of market discrimination. Basically, there are three theories which tell you about the discrimination that we have in the labor market. Okay, so first model is a personal prejudice model. Okay, so of course, as the name is saying, it is about certain prejudices that we have against a particular group, race, or a sex. Okay, that would give me a reason to discriminate among those groups with respect to the salary or with respect to the job profile that I provide them. Second source is of a more generic nature, that is statistical prejudgment. Okay, so guys, what it is, where employers project onto individuals certain perceived group characteristics, stereotypes. So guys, statistical discrimination, it's basically that when I want to understand about the productivity of a particular individual. Okay, and now in order to understand about the productivity, how can I look into certain characteristics? Okay, so first is that I look into the individual characteristics, which is very difficult. Second is that I can understand about the individual characteristics by actually linking that individual into a specific group. So I know there are different groups of people. So I know that a particular group A is better because of some reason or some preconceived notion that you can say, or the data that I have. Similarly, if I put those individual in these uh, you can say certain perceived group which is written, so if that group is good and I see that this person belongs to group A which has a higher productivity, I'll give him the better wages. But if I believe that this individual belongs to a group B which has a lower productive capacity, then I will give him the low salary. But what is happening, because I have made certain stereotypes about that group A is better than group B, what would happen, I'm creating a source of discrimination. Okay, and that might not be good, because sometimes uh, even if that person belongs to group A, his average productivity might be much larger than what the group productivity might be. Similarly, if that person belongs to a group which has a very high productivity, but that individual personal average productivity might be very less. Okay, so guys, statistical prejudgment is basically when I create a discrimination, when I associate an individual with certain group characteristics. Okay, but that is generally what happens. It is a wrong way of discrimination, because there will always be a certain error that we commit, because that individual might have over above productivity or less productivity. So it might gain, we might lose because of that kind of a discrimination. Then the third source is non-competitive models of labor market. So these are which we will discuss in detail. Okay, so guys, but we start with the first one, that is your personal prejudice model. Okay, so certain prejudice that I have against certain ethnic groups or members belonging to certain groups. So these prejudice take three forms. It could come from three sources basically. From the employer side, that is the person who is giving me the job. Second, from the customer to whom I'm providing my services. Third could be from my side only. I might like to take a job which is being run by maybe a female, or it is run by a white male. So basically, the person who is seeking a job, he would also have certain prejudice. Okay, when he or she is taking up a job. So guys, it says that based on a personal prejudice, assume that either employer, customer, or employee, these are the three sources, have a prejudicial taste. That is, they have a preference for not associating with the members or people of certain demographic groups. Model assume existence of competitive labor market, that is your wage will be equal to MRPL. Firms are the wage takers, competitive, large number, so they cannot influence that. So they take wages given. So different types. So what could be the different types within this personal prejudice model? First is your employer discrimination model. Second is your employee discrimination model. Third is your customer discrimination model. Okay, three sources, three models. So guys, but the first one is the most important one and more elaborative. So guys, it says we are building certain assumptions for the model. It says suppose there's a white male employer. Okay, it's a white male and he has a prejudice against women or minorities, whatever. But customer and fellow employers are not prejudiced. Okay, they are not. Prejudice takes the form of not associating with women and minorities or motivated by the status consideration and take the form of the occupational segregation. Okay, so either not to be associated, not to give the job, or even if I'm giving the job, then I'm giving a job which has a different work profile. Please understand this. Occupation segregation, different work profile. So, but whatever the form, it results in the discrimination towards women and minorities. Either I don't give a job, that's a discrimination. And even if I give a job which has a low paying salary, that is also a form of desegregation, or giving a profile which gives me the less salary, occupational segregation. Now certain assumption, another important assumption is that women equal minorities equal white males, they have the same productive characteristics. So guys, you have to again understand that discrimination generally starts with the thing we assume that everyone is productive. Okay, discrimination comes from different sources. Why I'm discriminating? So of course it's a prejudice model. So we are first assuming that productive characteristics are same. They have the same marginal productivity. Now what happens if employers have decided preference for hiring white males in high paying jobs, a different profile which has a high paying job, despite the availability of equally qualified uh, women and minorities. They will act as if they are less productive than the former. Of course, if I'm segregating, I'm saying that I will give a high paying job to white males, and even if they are equally productive, but I'm offering them the less paying job, that is just a kind of a signal that they are less productive, even though they are not, but that's a signal. But by the virtue of assumption of equal productivity, the devaluing of their productivity by employers is purely subjective and is manifestation of personal prejudice. Okay, this reduction of their productivity, or which actually translate into the less salary, is based on a personal prejudice. The more prejudiced an employer is, the more actual productivity will be discounted, meaning that, so as we are saying, the everyone has the same productivity. So what I assume, that a wage for male must be equal to the wage for female, equal to the wage of minority, equal to the marginal productivity, which is constant, which is same. But because of your prejudice which is created by the employer, what they're saying, that they would be offered a less paying job. So as a result, a less paying job, meaning that I'm assuming that their productivity is less. So what I would do, I would subtract a certain level of productivity which is given by a discounting factor to find out a wage that these people will be receiving, that is women or the minority groups. Let's have a look at it so that it will become more clear. Maybe it might sounding a little confusing. So how do we show that? A mathematical explanation for that. So guys, suppose the marginal productivity, revenue productivity of all the workers in a particular labor market is MRP, which is same. D represent the extent to which this productivity is subjectively devalued for minorities and women. So if I think that these are not capable of doing a particular job, so what I will do, I will offer them a job which is less paying because it does not require that much level of, you can say, uh, effort on their part. So D could be referred as that effort or the reduction in the productivity, which is due to the prejudice that a particular employer has. Now, what happens, that market value of white males is reached when, of course, wage of white male. Okay, guys, please remember white male. That is WM equal to the marginal revenue productivity. For women and minorities, equilibrium is achieved only when their wage, or WF, equals to the subjective value that a firm has because of the employer. So it is basically MRP minus the discounting factor. So guys, greater the discounting factor, meaning that employer assumes that they are not at all productive, they should actually be at a lower, very low paying job. So larger the D, the less salary that particular that gender or a minority group would be receiving. So MRP minus D equal to WF. Okay, so guys, but assume this MRP is same because their productivity is same. So through equation 1 and 2, MRP are equal by assumption. So what happens? The wage of male equal to the wage of female plus D, or what we can say that wage received by a female or a minority is equal to the wage received by the white male minus the discounting factor, that is the value which is put by the employer in terms of devaluating their productivity. So if actual productivity of women and minorities devalued by the employer, worker in these groups must offer their service at a lower wages than the white males to complete their jobs. Okay, or maybe you're given a job which would require them a lesser effort on their part. Okay, guys, is this part clear? Is this equation clear? I hope it is clear for everyone. Guys, you can take a second and have a look at it. Okay, okay. So, guys, then we move ahead now regarding certain implications. Okay, so model has two implications. So, guys, of course, you would see that if we are not operating at a profit maximizing point, so what does that mean? I'm not maximizing my profit. That is, there is still a scope. That means one implication is that this particular employer is not a profit maximizer. He is a utility maximizer. Okay, so he's trying to fulfill his own wants. That is, his prejudice is more important than maximizing the profit. So, guys, one of the connotation is that it's very difficult to actually have this kind of a objective of prejudice, and it cannot be. It cannot be. You can say. It cannot be done for a very long time, because ultimately your profits would start to hamper. So me, what I'm trying to say, basically it is generally done by those firms which either have a lot of monopoly in the market, which could be created because of the cost, which could be created by a natural monopoly or by the government, where they can disaggregate members because of their prejudice. Because if the objective is profit, then they cannot survive, because when I'm operating below the point of the profit maximizing, that is where my MP equal to wages, then there's a lot of scope of increasing my wages. So, guys, one of the implication is that the focus is not on profit. So, guys, it says that the discriminatory employer faced with the market wage rate WF for women or minorities will hire N0 for the point. So, guys, let's see the diagram itself. So, guys, can you see this? This is your MRP. These are the 2 points DG. So, guys, one second. Okay. So, guys, actually, they should be paying a female worker wage WF, and they should be employing N1. Okay. But because of a certain prejudice, what is happening? They are actually providing a wage which is WF plus D. Okay. And ultimately, because of that, what is happening? They are only hiring N0 number of workers, which is less than the profit maximizing output. So, what is happening ultimately? Uh, if they would have not been discriminated, they would have a profit equal to AEG. Okay, but now because they are discriminating, there is a certain wastage which is happening. So as a result, their profits are only now AEFB. Guys, I'm repeating. So if that employer would have not been indulging in this discrimination practice, so what would have happened? He would be having a profit equal to triangle AEG. So basically, it is your revenue is area below your MRP curve, okay, minus the wage that you pay, okay. So that becomes AEG. Now, because you are indulging in that practice of wage discrimination, so what is happening? You are actually earning a profit, which is only equal to the area AEFB, AEFB. So which is less, okay. So discriminator thus give up profits in order to indulge into these prejudices. So guys, one of the implication is that I am forsaking my profit because I'm indulging in this practice. So guys, you can see, for a non-discriminatory employer the profit will be AEG. For a discriminatory employer it would be AEFT. Guys, I hope it is clear. इसमें कुछ टफ नहीं था. Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. Now, guys, second implication is in terms of the gap between my uh, male salary and a female salary. What are the implications relating to the gap? So, guys, it says the size of the gap between WM and WF. So, larger the gap, the greater will be the discrimination. So, relative salary ka baat ho raha hai. Determinants of wage gap can be best understood by moving from the analysis of firm to understanding the analysis of the market demand curve for minorities and women. So, guys, up till now we were just talking about one employer. Now we are talking about where you can say in aggregation, in about the market demand curve for your women and minorities. So, what is the implication? So, guys, in the figure 12.3 that is in the book, I'll just, yeah, this is figure 12.3. Okay, so I'll just tell you. So, guys, it says figure 12.3 market demand curve for women or minorities is expressed in terms of how they are expressing wage rate relative uh, to rate for white males. So, guys, basically, it is a wage rate of females relative to the wage rate of white males. Okay. So, guys, you would just see it is wage rate of female divided by the wage rate of male. This demand curve is a market demand curve, and this is the supply curve of the labor in the market. Number of labor that is higher, particularly number of women or minorities in the market. So, guys, what they are saying, yeah, figure assume that there are number of non-discriminatory employers will hire up to an NA women or minorities at a relative wage of unity WF equal to WM. So guys, if there is no discrimination for that matter that is happening, then your wage is actually unity. One, at this point, what is happening? They are hiring NA number of women or minorities, either which way, okay, whichever. So we are not just talking about women or minorities either. So these discriminatory, one second, okay. For those employers with discriminatory preferences, WF must fall below WM to induce them to hire women or minorities. So guys, just I'm repeating myself. If there is no discrimination in the market, that means there is no prejudice. So the relative wage of men and women or men or minorities would be same. So I would be operating at point A and I will be hiring NA, the wages become equal to A. Now, if there is a prejudice, that means there is a discrimination happening. So what we are saying, there is a certain discount that an individual places or the employer places, meaning that the salary paid to your women or minorities would be less. So what they are saying, if that is the case, then your wages, relative wage must fall. So it should be somewhere around 0.75, so that they are able to hire. So as a result, less number of people would be hiring. So guys, I'm just going back to where it is written. One second. Yeah. For those employers with discriminatory preferences, WF must fall below WM to induce them to hire. Of course, if the wages of female has to be fallen in order for them to hire, or even for the minorities. These discriminatory employers differ in their preferences, as some are willing to hire women or minorities at a small wage differences, or other requiring large differences. So guys, another thing, that within the discriminatory employers there will be two types. One would like to have a larger difference in the earnings of women and male, okay, but there would be some who would require a small difference. So that is dependent upon how much prejudice that you have against that particular group. So thus the market relative demand curve is assumed to be bent downward. Okay. So Aya, what I'm saying, that within the discriminatory employers, there would be two types of discrimination, or two, not two types. It is a relative magnitude of prejudice that have. Okay. Some employers might not be too much prejudice against women. So they won't require a much of a, you can say they would be offering them a fairly decent job. So if I'm offering a fairly decent job, the difference between the WM and WF would not be large. But if I have a larger, you can say, a prejudice against that group, then what I would do, I offer them a very bad job. As a result, the difference between the earnings of WM and WF would be very large. Okay, that is what they are saying. So they are saying it's subjective. It might change from one employer to the another. Am I clear, Arya? Okay. So guys, thus the market relative demand curve is assumed to be bent downward at point A. So यहाँ से वो झुक जाता है. It is falling downward. Rather than being straight, it bends downward. So guys, it says bend downward at point A, reflecting to employ an increased number of women or minorities would require a fall in WF relative to WM. Okay. So if you want to employ more of WF, then that would mean I have to reduce their salaries as well. So if the supply curve of women or minorities is relatively small, okay, so guys, one of the consequences. So if the supply curve is very small, that is the number of women and minorities are very less, then that would mean that there will be very less wage differential, or maybe to the extent there will be no wage differential. So then such workers will be hired by non-discriminatory and there will be no wage differential. So guys, what they're saying, that if the supply of women or minorities are very small, so what would they do, or what is a positive thing that would happen? Either they will be hired at a less wage differential, or they will be absorbed by the people who are non-discriminatory. That is at point one, where your WMF is equal to WF. That would happen. But if the number of women or minorities who are seeking the job is very large, okay, the supply is too large, then what happens? You can see the supply curve shifts from S1 to S2. If that happens, you can see that I'm hiring a larger number of people, but then I'm hiring at a lower wage pay, which is 0.75. So, guys, it says if the number of women or minorities seeking job is large, then the supply curve is S2. Then some discriminating employers will have to be induced to hire minorities, but they will be doing till the time WFM is below the WM. So combining supply curve S2 with a demand curve drives the wage down to 0.75. Okay. So guys, I'm just repeating myself. There are two implications what is happening. If the people who are seeking job is small, that is in minority and women, then they are largely absorbed by the non-discriminatory employer. That means the relative wages of men and women will be same. That is at one. But if there is a large number of people who are seeking the job, then the supply curve shifts towards right. But if the supply curve shift towards right, then there will be a lot of people who have certain prejudice. If they have to be induced to hire them, they can only be induced till the time I reduce my wages that I'm paying to them. So because of the increase in supply, the wages are reduced. Guys, I hope it is clear to everyone. I hope it is clear. Guys, is it clear? You can take a minute and have a look at it. Okay. So Arya, what is happening? They are talking about the implication in terms of uh, the size of gap between WM and WF, or WF by WM. So guys, why there is a difference between the salaries a man or a woman is receiving? It is because of the prejudice in the market. So what they are saying, that if there's a prejudice, then the relative wage between WF and WM would differ. That is, the relative wage would might fall, meaning that the salary received by the men would be larger than what is being received by the women. So guys, what they are telling about in the start, that in a market there will always be some employers who don't have a prejudice, and there will be some employers who would have a prejudice. Okay, so first they are talking about in a market where there is no discrimination. So if there is a no discrimination, means the relative wages are same because they have the same marginal productivity. So what happens? They have a wage rate of 1. At wage rate of 1, they are operating at a point A and they are employing n a number of workers, that is women or minorities. I hope this point is clear. Okay. Now they are saying that suppose it is dependent upon the size of the market, that is the size of people who are seeking employment. Okay, labor force participation. Now the labor force participation in minorities or women, if that participation rate is small, okay, then if that rate is small and the market is full of people who have discrimination and those who do not discriminate, so if people who are seeking job is small, what would happen? They will try to work for the people who are not discriminatory. Okay. So if they are non-discriminatory, what would happen? They would be receiving a salary of one, that is the same salary that a male counterpart is receiving, and n1 number of people will be employed. That is the case when there is a less number of people who are seeking the job. I hope this is clear. Because S1 curve mein there is n1 number of people. Okay. Now, what they are saying that if number of people who are seeking job increases. So guys, if the number of people who are seeking the job belonging to minorities or women increase, what would happen? Supply curve will shift towards right. So it moves from S1 to S2. As my supply curve shift, what is happening? There is a widening of gap between the relative wages. So it becomes 0.75. Okay. So at 0.75, I'm hiring a larger number of people N2. But what does that mean? Does that imply? That means that if people want to hire a larger number of people belonging to these ethnic groups or to the women, okay, to this gender, then they will be providing them the profile or the work at a lower salary. So guys, so there is a widening of a gap between the relative wages of minorities or male, men or women. So it becomes 0.75 and they are employing N2. I hope it is clear. Okay, it's a simple diagram. I hope it is clear to everyone. Okay, so guys, sorry, I'm just moving ahead. Let me just finish this part. So guys, it says the third implication. What is the third implication of this model? Beside changes in the labor supply curve of women or minority, there are other two factors that can cause market differential between the relative age. There could be a discrepancy because of some other reason that is coming from the supply side. First, given the supply, if the number of discriminators were to increase, as in the figure 2.4, so guys, the people who are demanding these jobs, okay, so guys, you have to understand. So if the number of employers increases, what would happen? So guys, first, given the supply curve, if the number of no, sorry, first they are talking about non-discriminators. If the number of non-discriminators were to increase, what would happen? So guys, very simple, the people who are becoming more conscious about or reducing their prejudice, what would happen? The wage differential would fall. So guys, you can see that in this diagram, this demand curve straight and then it bows down. Okay, it's a A. Now, if the number of people who do not discriminate increases, what happens? It shifts towards right. As a result, earlier my discrimination or the relative difference between YF and YM was 0.75. But because the number of people who are not following this discrimination increases, so as a result, what happens? The relative difference falls. It becomes 0.85, and I'm hiring more people with less discrimination. So this is a third kind of a implication. So guys, it says increase in the non-discriminator show up graphically as an extension of the horizontal segment of demand curve to A dash, and the relative wage is driven to 0.85. But behaviorally, the influx of non-discriminator absorbs more of the supply than before, leaving fewer workers who must find employment with the discriminatory employers. Of course, so if the number of people who are non-discriminatory increases, meaning that a larger proportion of population is engaged with them. So meaning that a very few people have to work with the people who are discriminatory because of the certain prejudice. Moreover, the few must still find work with the discriminatory are able to bypass the worst discriminator and go for those with the smaller preferences for discrimination. So again, we have said that within the people who are discriminating, there are the people who discriminate a lot. There are the people who discriminate to a small extent. So what would happen if there are very few people left to seek a job? They will be working with those who have a less preference for discrimination. I hope this part is clear. Guys, is this diagram clear? Okay.
Yes,
Now,
ma'am.
guys, okay. So, guys, just the last part of this employer model, it says second, the same rise in the WF relative to WM can occur if the number of prejudiced employers stayed the same, but their discriminatory preferences were reduced. Okay, so of course, so if a person who is discriminatory, their preferences are reduced because of some reason or the other, now they are less discriminatory. So what would happen? Of course, the gap between the relative wages would shorten up. They will equalize to one. So guys, it shows that a such reduction will shown graphically as flattening of the downward sloping market demand curve. So guys, you can see earlier my demand curve was steeper where it is bowing down. But once my preferences change, what happens? My demand curve, that is downward sloping part, becomes flatter. So once it becomes flatter, the intersection of S2 with my flatter demand curve, you can label as D1, D2, it would happen at 0.5. So what is happening? The gap between the relative wages is narrowing down. So guys, it says such reduction will show up graphically as the flattening of the demand curve. These changes hypothesized cause WF to rise relative to WM because of the inducement required by each employer to hire minorities or women is smaller. But the most disturbing implication of this model is that discriminators seem to be maximizing utility instead of profits. So, guys, that is what I said, because they are not hiring women or minorities where their W is equal to the marginal productivity. So, they are not maximizing. So, non discriminatory firms would normally make more money given the set of assets. So, guys, what would happen ultimately? Because of a competitive model of my market, those people who are not able to maximize profit or those who are discriminatory would have to exit the market because in the long run they cannot survive, because the people who are making profits would get hold of better people who get hold of better inputs. So as a result they will throw away these discriminate the people who are discriminatory. But one has to understand that this discrimination still exists and is largely done by the people which have a certain kind of monopoly power. This is something which I have already told. So, guys, this is the thing. So, guys, shall I end here or what do you suggest? Okay, yeah, guys, it's okay. I'll end. Brain overused. Okay. So, guys, what I will suggest, I'll upload this particular notes वाला section. इसके अंदर एक ये छोटा सा पार्ट है कस्टमर डिस्क्रिमिनेशन और एम्प्लॉय डिस्क्रिमिनेशन, ये छोटा एक एक पैराग्राफ है, ठीक है, इसको पढ़ लेना. एंड मे बी व्हेन वी मीट ऑन गाइस वी मीट ऑन ट्यूसडे और वेंसडे, एक बार मेरे को टाइम टेबल पता लग जाए अपना. सो आई विल टेल यू, वी विल मीट एंड देन वी विल फिनिश अप दिस चैप्टर. ओके, ये पढ़ लेना, इसमें कुछ है नहीं. कस्टमर
मैम
डिस्क्रिमिनेशन,
जो चैप्टर में इसके बाद पार्ट दिया हुआ है वो,
हाँ तो वो करेंगे ना जब हम मिले. कौन सा वाला पार्ट अन्ना?
इसके बाद भी बहुत सारे वो एक्ट्स और ये सब जो
हाँ
दिए
वो
हैं.
नहीं, मैं बता रही हूँ. सो गाइस आई एम टेलिंग यू दैट व्हाट वी विल बी कवरिंग. सो ये एम्प्लॉय डिस्क्रिमिनेशन और ये तो प्रेजुडिस मॉडल वाला ही हो गया. उसके बाद स्टैटिस्टिकल डिस्क्रिमिनेशन हम करेंगे, ठीक है. फिर उसके बाद जो पार्ट है नॉन कॉम्पिटिटिव मॉडल्स ऑफ डिस्क्रिमिनेशन, जिसमें क्राउडिंग है, ड्यू लेबर मार्केट है, सर्च रिलेटेड मोनोपोली है, जो इसके अंदर तीन है, ये हम करेंगे, ठीक है. उसके बाद जो पार्ट स्टार्ट हो रहा है इवैल्यूएशन ऑफ डिस्क्रिमिनेशन थ्योरीज, ये हमें नहीं करना है. इसके अंदर व्हाट आई सेड, वी विल ओनली बी डूइंग समथिंग कॉल्ड on the page number 454, comparable worth law. Guys, can you see that? Comparable worth law.
Yes, ma'am. So we don't have to do anything from page number 450 to 453.
हाँ, इसको पढ़ सकते हो अपने लिए, बट उसका कोई इम्पोर्टेंस नहीं है, ठीक है.
ठीक है, ओके.
कंपेरेबल वर्थ लॉ पे न्यूमेरिकल आता है जो हम करेंगे, ठीक है. सो वो है. Then we can skip this part on the federal compliance program, that is not required. Similarly, effectiveness of federal anti-discrimination programs can be omitted. What we have to do, जो small appendix में numerical given है ना, that we will be doing, ठीक है, जिसमें wage earning differential, वो I will do a numerical problem. So basically discrimination का last का theory जो रह गया है, plus comparable worth law, and third this numerical problem in the appendix that we will do. ठीक है. बाकी नहीं करना है. ओके. अच्छा guys, एक चीज और, I have uploaded those sample questions on your Google Classroom, and I've also uploaded 3 practice papers. ठीक है, just have a look at those practice papers. Okay. Okay guys.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.